I identify as an attack helicopter. It's a trend. It's a phase. You're not well. It's a lifestyle choice. You're going against God. I don't have a problem with it, but this is a list of a few things I've heard since I started to come to terms with being a queer, trans, non-binary person in this very binary, cis, heteronormative world we live in. I turned 23 the other week, and between that and being stuck home with my parents in lockdown 3.0, it got me thinking about when I first came out to them and how much or how little has changed since then. It was the week before my 19th birthday when I told my parents that I wasn't straight. I'd been dating my high school best friend for over a year and tried my best at keeping it a secret to the outside world. I remember being particularly terrified of telling my mum. She had always been a very religious and traditional woman, and I'm fairly sure the only queer person she'd ever heard of was Elton John at a push. I distinctly remember sitting opposite from her in a McDonald's as I tried to explain to her that I was queer and deeply in love with an incredible bisexual woman. Whilst it didn't go brilliantly, she couldn't quite wrap her head around the idea that my girlfriend was bi but was only dating one person. She seemed to tolerate it. And that was her attitude for years to come, and frankly still is to this day. She's not thrilled about it, but she tolerates it. I figured that telling her I was a trans non-binary person would go down the same way. She wouldn't get it, would make some horrific stereotype comment, wouldn't be too happy, but would just about accept it. The first person I ever told had been that same girlfriend, and she had been great. It was a lot of new information and adjustments, but she never looked at me any differently or loved me any less. She had endless patience for me whilst I was still figuring everything out. From a very young age, I remember hearing the notion that the only truly unconditional love is from your family. I was 20, my girlfriend and I had broken up. I was terrified, but I was finally ready to come out again to my parents, but this time as trans non-binary. It's been over 2 years since that day, and I still break down when I allow myself to remember it fully. I don't think I've ever had such a clear memory for something as I do for that moment. Initially, when I had told my mum, she hugged me. She said that she still loved me and that it would be okay. I was relieved. I went to bed smiling and texted my friends about how well it had gone. I woke up the next day excited, and I felt much lighter. As I opened my bedroom door, I saw a note on the floor. My mind was racing. My mum was the only other person at home at the time. I hadn't left anything there the previous night, and if my mum had gone out, she tended to send a text rather than leave a physical message. As I picked up the notes, I couldn't have prepared myself for what I was about to read. It was a long 2-page letter from my mum directed to me. There was maybe a second in my head when I thought it might be something nice. Maybe a congratulations on coming out, I'm so proud of you message. The rest is a little blurry. I can't quite remember if I finished reading all of it or if I stopped once I'd had enough. It was the worst panic attack of my life. I couldn't breathe, I was shaking, I was crying uncontrollably. It was my worst fear. One of those things that I'd always heard about online could happen, but never thought it would be part of my story. Some of the highlights I still remember include her telling me that I was mentally ill, that it was a choice, that I was going against God and our family, and for the grand finale, that if I did transition in any way at all, then I wouldn't be her child any longer. I didn't realize it that day or in the subsequent weeks or months that followed, but that was the day I lost my relationship with my parents. What we have these days is a sense of basic tolerance for the sake of my sister. For years, I've hidden away who I am from most people I meet. I felt so much shame and guilt in being who I am. I felt utterly unlovable, and worse yet, sometimes I've felt some of the words that my mum used against me. Parents are meant to love their children unconditionally, but what I found out that day is that mine didn't. When we speak now, they still dead name me, they misgender me, they still act like this has all been part of a lifestyle choice I've made. I think one of the most important things I've learned over the last 23 years is that love isn't necessarily blood. Love isn't an endless list of debilitating conditions to be met. Love is peace, patience, and grace. and that is something I found in my community and in my friends far more than any blood relation. Too many LGBTQ+ people have a similar story to this. Mine wasn't even that long ago, not really. The way we are treated by society, by those close to us outside of the community, is still a long way from respect and equality. Things have improved immensely in the last half century, but it's still incredibly difficult for a lot of us. Too many of us are still rejected by our own families, a pain that is hard to reconcile with. Too many of us grow up being called slurs and made to feel lesser for who we love or loving our true selves enough to show it to others. Too many of us still suddenly drop our partner's hand when we're walking for fear of violence and harassment. Too many of us are subjected to barbaric, unscientific practices of so-called conversion therapy, something that those in the highest parts of our government apparently still think is a matter of debate rather than the torture it truly is. The current status of being trans in the UK is terrifying and bleak. To receive any medical help from the NHS, you're currently looking at well over 3 years before even being granted a first appointment. Just last year, the government shelved any plan to reform the Gender Recognition Act, GRA, after running a public consultation for over a year that was bombarded by well-funded TERF groups, and despite over 70% responding in favour of it. This would have worked to streamline and demedicalise the process for someone to legally change their gender. Moreover, it included the legal recognition of non-binary people, which again was met with a majority in favour. Currently, we have no legal recognition in this country. No progress has been made, but a significant increase in anti-trans rhetoric and harassment has occurred. We are talking very basic rights here: equal access to healthcare and legal recognition. It's exhausting still having to fight for these things, even more so when you don't have the support of those around you. Not everyone is going to be an expert on LGBTQ+ people and the unique issues that we face. I first came out to friends nearly 6 years ago, and I'm still learning certain terminology and things about the community. But you don't need to be an expert to have respect, to have tolerance, to treat people with kindness, and to be an ally. Resources are available everywhere and in every format imaginable. Educate yourself, email your MP to bring back GRA reform, call out transphobia when you see it. It's 2020, I'm done hiding who I am or feeling like I have to justify my identity to others. LGBTQ+ rights are human rights, always.